Hello, good evening. I would like to check if I'm audible. Hello, good evening. I would like to check if I'm audible. Good evening po sa lahat ng mga followers na laging nanonood sa LMB channel. Tonight, we will have the discussion on lesson planning, strengthening lesson planning competencies using the ILAW template. And we would like to highlight that this will integrate the concepts of hot solo or the higher order thinking skills, structured observed learning outcomes, climate change adaptation mechanism, peace building, culture sensitivity, and the 21st century schools in making the lesson plan. So we are to discuss how to make a lesson plan using the ILAW template with the integration of the following: hot solo framework, CCAM, peace building, depth core values, culture sensitive, and 21st century skills. Without further ado, let us start with the integration of hot solo in the lesson plan using the ILAW template. Let us briefly discuss the Bloom's taxonomy. So the lower order thinking skills in the Bloom's taxonomy involves memorization, while the higher order thinking skills, or the HOTS, requires applying and working on that acquired knowledge. So before a learner can perform applying and working on the acquired knowledge, there's a need to memorize. So that is necessary to achieve HOTS. The Bloom's taxonomy had been revised in 2001. Of course, we know that the Bloom's taxonomy is offering and helping the teachers when preparing our learning objectives, when preparing our table specifications, when preparing our assessment items that target the different categories of quality. The Bloom's taxonomy has 6 levels. Starts with remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So creating is the highest level in the Bloom's taxonomy, wherein the learner is expected to produce new or original work. The Bloom's taxonomy often offer no relationship between the level of a question that is asked, the level of a learner's response given. The teacher can have a synthesizing question, but the student could just answer what the thing is about, which is a remembering answer. You may look at how good the test your questions, because in the TOS you have the question that is under analyzing, synthesizing, or evaluating, but the students are giving lower order thinking answers or not being able to answer at all. So that's one of the issues of Bloom's taxonomy. The category of a particular question does not usually provide a link to the level of understanding in a student's response. Number 2, the suggested hierarchy, the choice of words for each levels of Bloom's taxonomy makes it difficult to have an exact meaning or use the idea with young students. So for example, for grade 2 student, how can you tell them to analyze something or synthesize an information? The concepts are difficult for young learners. On number 3, there are difficulties with the complexity associated with putting the ideas of Bloom's into a normal classroom setting. Sometimes knowledge, for example, and understand may also be found in the higher order thinking skills. For instance, a learner responding to the question, what is Einstein's theory of relativity? That may be a recall question, what the theory is about, but recalling the said theory requires higher level of thinking. So there are issues on Bloom's taxonomy. That's why, to address these issues, there was an alternative approach, which is the structured of observed learning outcomes, or the solo taxonomy. So the solo is not interested about the question. Take note, the solo is interested in the level or quality of a response, and that gives you a real framework of how a learner is thinking. So the solo, or the structure of observed learning outcome taxonomy model, is a system to classify the quality of a response based on structural complexity. The solo has been used many times in the Philippines in the development of the PPST, the PPSSH, the supervisors, professional standards, and also the solo was used as a framework in developing the test items for the national qualifying examinations for school heads. So we need to understand some of the basic solo language. So we have here the 5 solo words that you need to be familiar with. We have pre-structural, unistructural, multistructural, relational, and extended abstract. So solo is the closest way of describing of how the brain actually works. So what does pre-structural mean? What does unistructural mean? What does multi mean? So for pre-structural, let's discuss this at the level of the teacher. A new teacher does not know anyone's name at the first day of classes. We are about to start our class. Next week is the opening block, no lesson plan, just diagnostic assessments or CRLA, RMA, theory, nutritional status, baseline, orientation to parents. So at first, the teacher does not know anyone's name at the first day of classes. That's pre-structural. For unistructural, multistructural, respectively, after a reasonable amount of time, the teacher begins to know the name of one student, uni, and then of other student, multi-structural. For relational, it is when eventually the story of each and the connection between and among the learners are being connected. For extended abstract, it's beyond. It is when you see something you are not expecting from the learners in the class. Now look at this slide. So we have on the left the revised Bloom's taxonomy, and on the right the solo taxonomy. So the pre-structural level, the solo taxonomy, is before the remembering. The unistructural is the same level with remember. The multi-structural is the same level with understand. The relational is in the same level with analyze and apply, which is of higher order thinking skills. And extended abstract is the same level with create and evaluate. That's the relationship between the Bloom's and the solo taxonomy. So what the lens of the learner, this is the description of the levels in the solo taxonomy model. During the pre-structural, the learner does not focus on the relevant area or the problem. There is no consistency, and the closure giving an answer is quick. So meaning, if the teacher asks a question, the learner cannot answer. The learner is not giving you something that is relevant to the question. In unistructural, the learner focuses on the relevant area, problem, but uses only one piece of relevant data. So when you ask a question and the learner answer one relevant data, that's unistructural. Then in the multistructural, it is when the learner has two or more pieces of data to answer your question without any relationships perceived between them. Just giving two pieces of data. No integration between those data. Some inconsistency may be apparent. At the relational level, the learner is able to give those data and link those data and form a relationship between those data. So the whole has become a coherent link structure. Of the extended abstract, the response of the learner goes beyond what is expected at the relational level. So the degree of abstraction increases. So there was relational and an additional. That means the conclusions can be held open or qualified to allow for logical alternatives. The response goes beyond. So let us practice. For example, we ask the teacher asked this question. Do you think it will rain soon? So the pre-structural answer, yes, it always rains on Saturday. A unistructural answer, I think it will rain because there are many clouds in the sky. So in the unistructural, there is one relevant data. In the multi-structural answer, I think it will rain because there are clouds over there and they are dark looking and the wind is coming from that direction. So there was how many relevant data that is relevant to the question? There are three, two or more. That's a multi-structural answer. The relational answer is yes, I think so. The clouds look very dark over there, and the wind is getting stronger, and the air feels different. It rained yesterday, and the weather seems very similar now. Look at those data. There are three relevant data, and there was interrelated. They connect those data into one coherent answer. So that's relational. The learner has three data and connect each data to achieve one coherent answer. Relationship, there's relationship between this data that was given. And an extended abstract. Yes, all the weather conditions seem to point to more rain. Dark clouds and winds from the southwest. However, it is really the dry season and it might not happen as the same conditions happened last week and no rain occurred then. Noticed that in the extended abstract, the learner has go beyond what is expected. And he has given an answer beyond relational level. He connected next with other concepts. Next, there was already a conclusion, abstraction, that he was able to deduce that although the conditions are present for rain to fall, it is really the dry season and it might not happen as the same conditions happened last week and no rain at all. So that's an example. So this is the diagram that will help us also visualize each solo level. On the left, the triangle is the Q, is the question. While on the right, R is the response. In the middle, there are the kinds of data. X for irrelevant, the shaded circle for relevant, and the blank circle for related and hypothetical. So let's have the next slide to provide visualization of what have already been discussed in the previous slide. So in the pre-structural level, the learner does not focus on relevant or appropriate data. So the response is irrelevant or inappropriate. In the unistructural, the learner was able to pick one bit of information in providing a response, one related response. In the multi-structural, the learner was able to pick up more than one bit of information, related information in providing a response. In the relational level, the learner is able to pick more than one bit of information. There are 4 in this diagram, and was able to relate, to link, or connect them when providing a response. So that is more than the multistructural, because at the relational, the learner was able to relate, to link, connect each of those data when providing a response. In the extended abstract, the learner also pick up data that is not given, hypothetical data, then provides a response or 2 or 3 response. So he was able to provide more than one data, connect those data, and add hypothetical data or answers that were not part of the options. He was able to provide more than one response. So these are some examples of verbs that are applicable to each solo levels. So for unistructural, the verbs under solo taxonomy define is to define a single concept, identify, do simple procedure that's unique. The multistructural verbs can have also define, describe, list. There are one or more. Do, algorithm, combine. Under the relational level, the verbs are compare and contrast, its relation, explain causes, sequence, classify, analyze, part, whole, relate, analogy, apply, formulate questions. Under the extended abstract, evaluate, theorize, generalize, predict, create, imagine, hypothesize, reflect. Those are the verbs applicable to each solo level. So the solo level describes the thinking processes on a scale of increasing difficulty or complexity. It helps you think as a teacher where to move your student next based on their response. It even helps you think about your own thinking. So, solo is very relevant us as teachers, to us as workers. The level of understanding of the response, we can deduce it based on the solo taxonomy. So, solo helps us see what responses are on lower order thinking and higher order thinking. So the solo model offers a framework that you can use to, one, describe a response to a learned activity or question, as well as help a teacher decide where students should proceed with their learning. It offers practical support in writing questions that can differentiate higher order and lower order ideas. Understand or help develop teaching programs, learning progressions, and lessons that mirror how the brain learns. So once you know solo, you can understand and cannot ignore what solo is telling you to do. Because based on the response of the learner, you can identify if they know, if they are at the lots or at the huts. So solo thinking is consistent with how the brain learns. Solo has a strong logic moving from one level to the next. The brain cannot skip a level as each higher one depends on the one before. Solo offers clear learning pathways that help teachers focus on content knowledge among other things. There are 5 levels to the basic solo model linked to how information is structured in the brain. So let's take solo at the perspective of a driver. So when we start learning to drive, what are some of the big ideas we need to worry about? Stepping on the accelerator, changing gears, using the rearview mirror. Describe what a person driving a vehicle look like at the unistructural level, multistructural level, and relational level, as well as in the extended abstract level. So the unistructural, the driver, student focuses on one thing only, such as the steering wheel or using the accelerator, apakan ng accelerator. Very dangerous time for learner and the passenger, focusing only on one thing. For multistructural, the driver follows a set of procedure. Stopping only involves the brake. Not changing gears or taking one's foot off the accelerator. This is why we need an extensive period of practice. At the relational level, the driver can see connections between the different aspects of driving. When to turn the steering wheel, when to push the accelerator, when to apply the brake, when to change gears. So the actions become more routine. He knows the connections of different activities in driving. With extended abstract, it goes beyond driving the car. Driver is competent with the most aspects of driving, as well as more aware outside the car at pedestrians and the drivers of other cars. That's the extended abstract level. Now let's look at the application of Zolo in cooking. The person is preparing a meal and is receipt available. Describe what you might typically see for the following solo levels. Look at uni, multi, relational, and extended abstract level. So the unistructural, the cook have trouble reading a scene. Keep looking at the individual aspects, the individual ingredients. Multistructural. The cook or chef can follow straightforward recipes and can make a good meal if they follow the recipe. Relational often does not need a recipe. So the chef has done so much cooking, have recipes in their head, and can improvise. To the extended abstract, the cook would be a chef, a professional cook, and come up with new ideas about cooking, which is beyond what is in the recipe. That's solo when cooking. How about in classroom management? Let us look at the solo in classroom management. So let us look about a teacher handling class. What might be happening at the pre-structural level up to the extended abstract level? What would you say if you were a mentor for teachers? They were at this different solo levels. So at the pre-structural level, the students ignore the teacher. The teacher cannot control the class and pleads for quiet. The teacher does not know what to do. That's the pre-structural level. Unistructural, the student focus, the student or the teacher focus on one student or one incident and cannot deal with the other issues. So their poor behavior continues between the students. At the multistructural level, the teacher is aware of the number of issues and tries to deal with them at a time. He's usually not very successful. Spot fire problems, put one out, another starts up. At the rational level, the teacher notices number of issues and links them together to help address the problems. And focus of solution is on the teaching decisions taken. So there is link among the issues and help it to address the problem. The approach usually is successful. The extended abstract, the teacher draws on other experiences, such as knowledge of students, organizes lessons to minimize the chance of problems arising using different techniques that are special with the class. That's an extended abstract. So the different thinking or the different responses can be classified as either lower and higher order thinking, higher order response. The lower order questions or responses are at the unistructural and multistructural levels because information can be taught in the traditional sense. So, lots pag nasa uni at sa multi-structural levels. The higher order questions or responses are at the relational level and extended abstract. Teaching in a traditional sense is problematic. Students need to be placed in situations to develop their own connections, their own way. So after we understand the basic concepts and the solo, we now move to the climate change adaptation and mitigation. We needed to know the concepts so that we can integrate this in making a lesson plan. So there are resources of this in www.dep.gov.ph/climate-change-education. There are curated resources for teaching climate change. So the climate change adaptation program, core messages and basic concepts are present in DepEd Order number 82, series of 2010. What's the vision of climate change adaptation and mitigation? The vision was young Filipinos are aware of the climate change impact, ready to adapt to its adverse effects, and understand the contribution of greenhouse gases to such change. That's the vision of the CCAM. The mission is to integrate climate change adaptation concepts into the basic education curriculum and with all educational materials to be developed. What's the core message? Number one, signs of climate change. Climate change is caused by both natural events on human activities, the greenhouse gases emissions influence climate change. The greenhouse gases emission concentration has increased since the Industrial Revolution, resulting to global warming and climate. The temperature rise is the key concept, global warming. Unusual weather patterns are being experienced in all corners of the world. Second, human activities relative to climate change. Human activities have caused the increased greenhouse gases. Agricultural and food production practices can contribute to climate change. The climate change impacts human health and agriculture, among others. Number 3 core message is the stewardship rules. We must learn or tell our learners that we have one Earth that is threatened by climate change. We need to protect it, stewards of God's creation. Individual and global efforts are critical in the atmosphere in stabilizing greenhouse gases concentration in the atmosphere. So the core message is we need to change our lifestyle in order to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Indigenous practices and environmentally sound technologies can lead to mitigation and adaptation responses to climate change. Quality life depends on the proper utilization and conservation of resources. So these are the learning areas where the concepts of climate change adaptation shall be integrated. So it's almost all learning areas: English, science, math, social studies, map, and TL, Filipino values. There are a lot of depth order, a lot of policies, relations, adaptation, and mitigation. This includes the WINS program, the Gulayan sa Paralan, the solid waste management, tree planting, tree growing, tree caring program, the establishment of the ISO organization, and there are also disaster risk and reduction management policies like the comprehensive DRR in basic education framework, the student-led school watching and hazard mapping. These are the policies that are relevant to climate change mitigation and adaptation. So what's the difference between climate mitigation and climate adaptation? So climate mitigation is human intervention that reduces the emission of greenhouse gas. How are we going to do that? Protect and restore the forest. Improve energy efficiency using renewable resources. Adapt agricultural practices. And perform sustainable waste management recycling. Climate adaptation is the process of adjusting to the current and future effects of climate change. So these are flood control, flood protection, that's climate adaptation, biodiversity conservation, climate resilient buildings, typhoon proof, earthquake proof, flood proof buildings, and disaster risk management. So how can we do climate mitigation? Walking, biking, carpooling, urban gardening, reducing meat consumption, promoting renewable energy like solar, wind power, hydroelectric, tree planting, and refusing the use of single-use plastics. This climate mitigation. We use we do not use single-use plastic when we use yung mga bag, yung mga paper bags. That's climate mitigation. Climate adaptation, we have early warning systems for flood, that's adaptation. Early warning device for tsunami, for storm surge. Climate resilient buildings and homes. Then we have there the tree planting and growing. Tree growing is both a mitigation and adaptation strategy. So that's why Karen's tree planting among our learners. For mitigation, to reduce, so that trees absorb carbon dioxide, which decreases the greenhouse gases emissions. For adaptation, the trees absorb water, which reduce flood and landslide and helps to cool air temperature through transpiration and provision of shade. Trees, like mangroves, act as natural barrier to protect coastal communities from storms, surge. Basically, these are the concepts that need to be integrated when making lesson plan with CCAM integration. Now, let's talk about peace building and DepEd core values. In DepEd Order number 16 series of 2022, peace building refers to range of measures targeted to reduce the risk of lapsing or relapsing into conflict by strengthening capacities at all levels for conflict management and to lay the foundation for sustainable peace and development. This is to reduce the risk of conflict. Peace building. Peace education refers to transformative education, education that seeks to change the mindset, the values and behaviors that have led to direct structural and other forms of violence in our society. So this is the reverse of indoctrination. That is to change the mindset of the values and behaviors that led to violence. That's peace education. So in this same DepEd order, it strengthens the DepEd core values, makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, makabansa, as the intended outcomes of the peace framework, so that in teaching, the teachers are expected to introduce peace when discussing DepEd core values. That's for the best interest of our learner. The same DepEd order states that the stewardship for the environment is also one of the major themes of the K-12 curriculum. So, in the same learning areas mentioned, Araling Panlipunan, Values, Health, IPAPA, English, Filipino, Math, Music, so it can be integrated For example, the reading materials in English may discuss stewardship as the same. So the integration in the curriculum is also complemented with YesO organizations, gulayan sa paralan, solid waste management, and the tree planting under the National Greening Program. Of course, we have the GMRC, which includes the inculcation of patriotism, nationalism, and education, peace education. So the DepEd Order number 16/2022 also look at schools as the zone of peace. So it's always underscores that adopting a peace lens, or one that is conflict sensitive, culturally appropriate, and peace promoting in implementing DepEd regular programs, ensure that every learner becomes a peace-loving citizen. So the adoption of a peace lens is necessary to achieve this goal. So it is vital that when we make lesson plans, we integrate the concepts of peace. Then we have culture sensitive. DepEd Order number 51 series of 2014 highlights that all employees in DepEd must be cultural sensitive, respect the diversity of culture in all aspects, as well as in the conduct of learning activities. In this DepEd Order number 32 series of 2015 also highlights the contextualization wherein educational processes related to curriculum to a particular setting, situation, or area of application to make the competencies relevant, meaningful, and useful to all learners. Contextualization may be described and distinguished into the following. Localization. This refers to the process of relating learning content specified in the curriculum to local information and materials in the learner's community. That's localization. The learning content is being related to the local information and materials in the learner's community. You're Cebuano, you use local information materials in Cebu or any Cebuano speaking towns. Indigenization refers to the process of enhancing curriculum competencies, education resources, teaching and learning process in relation to the biogeographical, historical, sociocultural context of the learner's community. Indigenization will also involve the enhancement of the curriculum framework, curriculum design, and learning standards of subject areas guided by the standards and principles that adhere to national curriculum. Do we have examples of localization and indigenization of the curriculum? So for example, in localization, the process of localization focused on enhancement of the curriculum content and is generally the same for communities in the country. Example, translating a story is specified in the teacher's guide to the locality's language. Translating popular stories which may not have originated from the learner's community to the local language. That's localization. Translating. Number 2, using the stories of the learner's local community as a springboard to teach competencies in the language subject. Use the stories, yung mga stories that are found in the local community. Biyag niya lamang. Is an example. Number 3, using local facts as examples for lessons. The local plants in the vicinity of your school. The local fauna, the animals in the community, the names of persons in the locality, the mayors, the barangay captain, the personalities that are known in your locality. When formulating problem-solving statements, local practices are example of technologies discussed in the class. Technologies that are found in the locality. Number 4, use of local resources and materials for instructional aids. Local plant, for dye, for paints, parts of local plants to enhance posters and manipulatives, actual plants or animals as specimens, soil, dry lipsticks, wood barks, or art objects. These are localization. And the indigenization, this is where we can enhance the curriculum competencies. Take note. The competencies. So, in indigenization, we can include the context and values of the community in the content standards, as well as in the performance standards, as well as in the learning competency. So we can enhance the content standards, the performance standards, and relate it to the context and values of the community that you belong. That is indigenization. So we can use that in the budget of work. The content standards in the budget of work, the performance standards in the budget of work can be enhanced. Relating it to the biogeographical, historical, and socio-cultural context of the learner's community. Then we have the 21st century skills. These are the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, and competencies that learners need to develop. They can be prepared for and succeed in work and life in the 21st century. There are four domains of the 21st century skills. They are information, media, and technology skills. Second domain is the learning and innovation skills. Third is the communication skills. Fourth is the life and career skills. Those are the four domains of the 21st century skills framework. So let's discuss the first. This is the information, media, and technology skills. This domain encompasses the contributory and significant skills applied required in all academic subjects, thus challenging learners to sift through, communicate ideas, and utilize this information through ICT, media, libraries, and archives in critical, creative, and ethical manner. So these are the different skills under information, media, and technology skills. So visual literacy, information literacy, media literacy, technology literacy, and digital literacy. So if we look at the 21st century skills framework, every domain, there are a lot of skills. Presently on the revised grade 6, 9, and 10 curriculum, the 21st century skills framework that were highlighted were creativity, where learners create new ideas, original ideas, critical thinking, that is higher order thinking skills, arrive at conclusions, collaboration, that's the learners work as a team, share the ideas, that's under communication skills, interactive communication, life and career skills is another domain where learners should have self-discipline, resilience, and adversity management and adaptive leadership. So those domains, the learning and innovation skills, is a set of abilities where learners think critically, reflectively, and creatively, analyze and solve problems, create and implement innovations. It's learning and innovation skills. Communication skills put premium on communication skills in all forms and contexts. Verbal, non-verbal, express their feelings, provide feedback. Communication skills is also when you learn to negotiate and to manage conflict. Life and career skills prepare the learners to make informed life and career decisions, enable them to become citizens in a dynamic global community. As responsible citizens, hold meaningful and productive jobs and business that will contribute to the sustainability and welfare of the community beyond adversity. Again, these are the 21st century skills. It is expected that throughout their education, our Filipino learners develop these 21st century skills in addition to foundational literacy and numeracy. We focus on the basics, literacy, numeracy, discipline, together with the 21st century skills so that our Filipino learners will succeed in the future. Now let's go into the lesson planning and learning design. So based on the present policy briefer, the lesson planning is repositioned as a practical instructional tool rather than paperwork exercise. Teachers are explicitly trusted to use professional judgment and adapt based on the learner's needs and evidence. So the new policy encouraged the co-created lesson plans, luck-based collaborative planning, and acceptance of shared outputs as valid evidence of preparation. So encourage yung mga departmentalized, they can co-create their lesson plans. One teacher will be assigned to vet. They will discuss what are the appropriate strategies, activities, one learning competency, and select the best. So that can be done during LAC session. Preparing lesson plans can be done in a Google Drive where everyone will input and work collaboratively. So this is 21st century. We can use technologies. Teachers can co-create lesson plans using the web. That's the encouragement of the new policy. Lesson plans shall be used for the alignment of goals. Activities, assessments, and reflection are meant to reduce unnecessary workload. One teacher is assigned to make one subject lesson plan for one subject. It will be shared to all teachers on the same subject. They can discuss and add, enhance the lesson plan. That's to reduce workload. Our lesson planning shall be guided by the 8 evidence-based learning design principles. These principles describe the ideal experience for learners, the core features of effective instruction. You have clear teaching goal, scaffolding, checks for understanding, active retrieval and spacing, self-awareness and metacognition, social learning, values and purpose integration, and inclusion. These 8 evidence-based learning design principles should be our guide making a lesson plan. So the parts of the lesson plan now follows the ILAW format. I for intention, what the learners are expected to learn and achieve. L, learning experiences, how learners engage with the content and build understanding. Assessment, how learning is checked, measured, and understood. And the W is wrap up, how learning is summarized, reflected on, and extended. These are the parts of the lesson plan start with the information part. So these sections give the basic details of the lesson, serves as the identity of the lesson. So you have the name of lesson or title, learning area, teachers who have designed, for what grade level, how many sessions, what are the references, and the declaration of the AIUs based on depth order. Number 3, series of 2026. So that's the information part. Second is the intentions. This section focuses on what learners need to master by the end of the lesson. It includes the learning competency, the learning objectives, and the learning context. Then we have the learning experience. It describes how the lesson will actually happen. It includes pre-lesson and the flow. The pre-lesson, where the teachers prepared the learners for the lesson by welcoming them, checking readiness, activating prior knowledge, and introducing the objectives. The second is the flow, where the teacher lays out the sequence of activities across one or more sessions. This may include engagement activities, guiding reading, discussion, group work, practice tasks, evaluation, and reflection. Of course, the activities in the flow must be connected to the learning objectives and should apply the learning design principles. These are the learning design principles. Number 1, clear goals and teaching. Every lesson begins with specific learning goals. Learners understand what they are expected to learn, to do, and achieve. So it should be that the objectives are aligned to the standards, to the budget of work, the competencies in the budget of work. Second, scaffolding. Remind teachers to provide a step-by-step support, such as models, examples, guided practice, until learners are ready to work independent. An example is I do, we do, you do together, you do alone. That's an scaffolding. The teacher provides right support at the right time to help the learners build understanding and develop independence. This is also congruent with zone of proximal development. Slow release. At start, the teacher is guiding, slowly release the support until the learner was able to do it by their own. Third, text for understanding. We can implement, we can regularly check and find out what learners understood and what they need help based on understanding their responses, based on what we learned from the solo taxonomy. The quality of the responses of the learners, teachers can be able to deduce if they are already at the higher order thinking skills. Teachers must regularly ask questions, observe learner responses guided by the solo framework, and use a quick activity to determine whether the learners understand the lesson or need further support. Number 4, active retrieval and spacing. Help learners remember more and retain longer by actively recalling knowledge and spacing learning over time. To active retrieval, example, you ask question without looking at the notes. Use quick quizzes or brain dump. Ask learners to explain or teach to appear. They share, it's active retrieval. These are opportunities for learners to recall the previous lessons, to revisit important concepts over time. That is also spacing. You mix the old and the new topics in the practice. Recall and then connect. Recall the previous, connect with the new one. That's active retrieval and spacing. It's a principle that we must follow in making a lesson. Another is self-awareness and metacognition. Encourage the learners to reflect on their thinking and learning so they can set goals, monitor progress, takes ownership of their growth. When they reflect what they know, how they learn, what they find difficult, or what strategies can help them improve. Help them be self-aware. Help them to reflect. And you can do that by giving opportunities for them to do so. Foster a growth mindset and ownership of learning. Number 6, social learning. Of course, learners learn by themselves, but learning is strengthened through interaction, through collaboration, through discussion, through shared understanding, by shared learning experiences. Another principles is the values and purpose integration. Of course, this is aligned with the integration of values, peace building, because you connect the learning to the real life context. and share the values to build meaning, motivation, responsible action. You connect the lesson to the real life situations. Find the why. What's the purpose? Why? So you connect it with the real life situations. We want our learners to solve real world problems, real life, for them to become successful. Number 8 is inclusion. So part of the instructional design framework, instructional principles is inclusive. So we must create learning environment where every learner feels valued, supported, and able to participate and succeed. We must remove the barriers to participation in learning. Foster a welcoming, supportive environment. So the 8 based learning design principles can be found in an instructional design framework. For checking for understanding, can be found the context. Based on the context of the learner, we start where they are. So we must often check understanding using the Zolo taxonomy. Active retrieval and spacing. So we connect it with the first previous learnings because the current framework, the content is developmental progression from simple concepts to complex concepts. It must be integrity. And social learning is synonymous to collaboration. Self-awareness and metacognition is ideational and empathize in the instructional design framework. The values and purpose integration is also integrity, and inclusion is inclusive. It is equal to all. Of course, we have also the part of the ILAW is the learning resources. You list, enumerate the materials, the tools, the references that support the lesson. The resources should be available, age appropriate, and aligned with the learning objectives. And the opportunities for integration, this is where the teacher identifies the possible connections with other learning areas, special topics, values, or technology. If there is no meaningful integration, the teacher may write not applicable. But you can look for opportunities for integration depending on the level of understanding of the teacher. So, pag mataas ang kanyang relational thinking, dito marami ang pwede niyang ma-integrate. Yung mga learning areas and competencies. Then we have the assessment. Of course, we know that formative, summative assessment. The ways forward, this is how the learning is summarized, reflected on, and extended. So, school head should provide structured collaboration opportunities for our teachers, protect their ancillary time, manage instructional leadership announcement, assignment, and keep feedback flowing to the school supervision office. The policy states that lesson plans should be used as supportive tools for developmental feedback. Tulong yan, developmental feedback, with short walkthroughs on coaching encourage, promoting an effective and collaborative role of school heads as supervisors for teachers. Instructional support. The policy emphasizes the importance of instructional leadership as a support mechanism that enables teachers to continuously develop in lesson planning. It is important to provide timely and evidence-based feedback so that teachers become more reflective with their instructional practices and decision-making process. Now here is the step-by-step guide in designing an ILAW lesson plan with full integration. So we'll have the same discussions in the next live edition. So see you in the next live session that will be happening tomorrow night, where we will discuss the step-by-step guide and designing an ILAW lesson plan with full integration. So thank you for watching. Subscribe to our channel. Click like, subscribe, and share if you like this video. Next time, see you again on our step-by-step guide in designing an ILAW lesson plan with the full integration. Thank you for watching. And see you in the next live session.